Welcome to the Value Makers Podcast, hosted by Ryan Purvis, supported by Heather Bicknell, as we meet with people that make value happen and hear their stories. Enjoy.
Pretty with you,
Great. So after all our technical hitches, welcome to the Value Makers Podcast. Do you want to introduce yourself quickly, please? As it frozen now.
Just stop working on audio.
I can't believe this.
Hang on, you can't believe this, right? I can hear you guess. I literally went, what did Van Nock work with that?
Stop. Well, I tell you what. Can you hear me
sure.
now? Is it okay? Cool. Let's not talk about Guinness. Obviously, saying Guinness is like a bad word.
Fire away, Rian.
Do you want to introduce yourself? Because I'm pretty sure that recorded at my side fine.
Sure, and you're going to edit it, sure. Hi, Ryan. I'm Jason Joe. I'm the VP of Solutions in Teamviewer now. I spent the past 11 years in 1E and joined Teamviewer as part of that acquisition.
So you guys don't talk about 1E anymore. That's now rebranded completely.
1E, yeah, I remember that company. They were great.
Yeah. Okay. So you've transitioned into the blue mothership.
Absolutely. Yes,
Oh,
I
that's
just feel like the orange color, it goes really well with the blue. And I've got the couch. Actually, I have an equal opportunities couch because it's blue and orange. But
Oh yeah, good. Important to be corporate brand. Yes. I must say, I've actually been using TeamViewer a lot this last couple of weeks. I'm impressed. I was having this thought, like if you could just use your, so what I'm using it for is I'm trying to talk to Cursor, want to build stuff for me because it's not a web-based tool, obviously. And I walk around with my phone and I'm not logging in. I'm just like typing, and it's a pretty good experience.
the thing that blew my mind when we started, the sort of deal happened in January, but I was involved with it pre that. It was all hush and we couldn't speak about it on pain of death and all that good stuff. But that was probably late September, early October last year. And I knew of TeamViewer in the way that you're talking about TeamViewer now. That's the remote control, look at share screens and that kind of stuff. I hadn't got a clue as to the sort of breadth of what their business does. It is insane. And some of the tech they had is really interesting around augmented reality. And they do stuff with like all sorts of crazy stuff. We've got airplane engines, Formula One engines, healthcare, remote nurses wearing headsets in remote clinics in Australia and the bush, where the nearest doctor is a 5-hour drive away, and they're looking after an OAP, and they bring the doctor in, and the doctor is able to see what the nurse sees and talk to the nurse through the headset, but also is able to draw on their screen and say, please do this, do that. And basically those drawings stick to where they're put on the nurse's vision. And the doctor essentially remote diagnoses and stuff like. So it's still remote control in the broadest possible sense, but it's crazy stuff. There's some really cool tech in there. Frontline is that area.
I didn't even realize I had that stuff. My knowledge of TeamViewer was just the remote stuff and really desktop support.
Neither did I, and now I work with them, I'm aware of it. But I began becoming aware of it when I was as the noises were being made that we may be acquired, and I was getting involved in that process. I was investigating TeamViewer. Now, officially, that's actually all part of my remit. All that tech is under my umbrella as well.
So maybe talk us through that. How you mentioned obviously there's a lot of stuff there, but how are you repositioning from end user really, which is when he was about compliance and end user experience, so what it to this more? I'd probably say a more holistic end to end view, I would guess.
Yeah, Dex. It's funny. 1E has always been about automation, and essentially, one of the things we used to sell on was the fact that you could use that automation to reduce the need to do one-to-one remote control sessions, for example. I would say you can cut that down. We always knew that you could never get it down to zero because there's always going to be cases where you do need to get that remote control, and the support person needs to talk to the end user one-on-one and go through things with them, maybe take control of the machine. But we used to minimize that all the time. So actually, I think one of the reasons that TeamViewer required us was that automation is a fact. It's a reality. And if you don't have that in your sort of tool set, then you are going to become less and less relevant over time, particularly in the enterprise space. But the thing is that we ignored OT and we ignored workers who were not using computers. But now, again, with that augmented reality stuff, we have customers who are picking various different medicines in warehouses where they supply pharmacies, and they've got headsets on that are telling them what drugs they need to get from which area and how many they need to put into this delivery and when the delivery is complete and gamified and all sorts of cool stuff. they're very much digital workers. We never even thought of that when we were talking about or building out the definition of DEX. It's a relatively new area. Very definitely. Yeah, and for that business, what they do is they deliver drugs to pharmacies, right? So that's, if those guys can't do that stuff, then they are down. And the uptime, the performance, the availability and experience of using that digital tech is as important to that business as using a laptop is for you or I.
And I'm curious, that use case of the augmented reality, did that come from the customer, or was that something that came out of R&D that went to go find some customers? I don't know if you know the answer to that, but
Yeah, it predates me by a long way, but it actually came about, it became part of Teamviewer's portfolio through an acquisition several years ago.
okay.
I think Frontline now is a product called Front.
Yeah.
But that whole augmented reality area has waxed and waned in public opinion over time. The stuff that Teamviewer does with it is genuinely insanely cool and only positive. It's only positive for the people using it as well. Like previously, this particular company I'm thinking of, there's a video of them on the Teamviewer website, but previously they're in Mexico and they supply a lot of the pharmacies in Mexico. So previously, Juan Maria in their warehouse in Mexico was going around with a clipboard and a pen, and they were getting printouts and they were ticking boxes as they went and doing various things. And it was a very manual and potentially error prone thing. Now they've got a glove on. It's their one glove, like Michael Jackson, and they have a headset on. That's our work. And they walk around. They express a much greater degree of engagement because essentially it's gamified. And when they pick the things, they're doing this motion, and that counts. I put 3 boxes into this big box that I'm going to send to the pharmacy in Guadalajara, and 3 boxes from here. And they're scanning there's a barcode thing on it, right? So they're basically scanning the barcode, picking the boxes, putting them in the box, and then they might have to get for that pharmacy for that day. There might be 60 different types of drugs that come from 60 different areas in this giant aircraft hangar sized warehouse. And they got to go to the different areas, get the right number of the right drugs in the right order or right set of them, and put them in the right order and send them off. And previously that was just a massive drudge tick here, and it was more error prone as well. And one of the cool things that Teamviewer tracks is even the carbon impact of the reducing errors. If you send stuff and it's the wrong stuff, it has to be sent back, or you've got to send stuff again, and there's all shipping involved in all of that, and that has carbon impact as well. There's a ridiculous amount of, you wouldn't think about it, non-obvious, but absolutely really cool stuff that they do as well. And it's all ultimately related to DEX, because those people are as much a digital employee as you or I are now, whereas previously they were a clipboard and pen and paper employee.
So a lot of what I've done in my past has been around the sort of field automation, be it the sales reps or technicians or whatever it is. And back in those days, there was the Microsoft phone, the 6.5 one. I don't know if you remember that one. And when I moved into the sort of more corporate world, which was just really laptops and virtual machines, it felt like that was all left behind, because now you have an Apple phone or an Android phone, and there's only so much you can do with Apple, and you can do a lot more with Android. But I completely lost the view of augmented reality in that respect, besides some of the property stuff that I did. I never really felt like anyone was doing anything. So it's good to hear that somebody's actually gone to that length, because it's quite interesting.
Oh no, the insanely cool stuff is, and there was a big manufacturing technology show in Hanover a couple of months ago, and we had we sponsored the Mercedes Petronas Formula One team. We had a large part of a Mercedes engine there, and a Formula One engine, and we had a tablet, okay, just a regular Android tablet, and it's again augmented reality. We started this talking about augmented reality, but it's just pretty cool. But you pick up this tablet and you point it at the engine, and obviously it's got a camera on it, so you can see the engine on the tablet. But it takes that part and puts it into an augmented reality car, and you can actually see it, and you can tap on different parts of what you're seeing on your camera, and it will explain to you the function of that part, and you can see what other parts connect to that part and where all of this goes in relation to the car. And as you move around with the camera, it's pivoting the car. And
holy cow!
So it's essentially using in real time, right? We understand this physical object exists, and then we have a 3D render of that physical object as part of a number of 3D renders of the entire car as a whole. But it's fast enough and smart enough that without even putting like some computing tech puts QR barcodes and stuff on different parts of it so that it understands those as anchor points. So as you move around, we don't have any of those anchor points. It just is smart enough to go in 3D space based on what I'm seeing on this camera. I can understand that object is this object and it's rendered and I'm bringing it around and I can move everything else with it as I move the camera around. It's crazy, but like the reason those anchor points are a pain in the ass is that if you are, and we did this with, I think we can talk about the customer with another video on the website with GE for airplane engines. And so we're training people on how to service those engines. Or if there's a general recall or part of a thing that must be done to all of the engines, they can issue instructions on how to do this and they can show it on a tablet like that, or even on a phone if you need to, very narrow view, but whatever. And the cool thing is that there's already hundreds or thousands of those engines out there. They didn't get shipped with those QR codes stuck in precise areas on their fuselage or whatever. So basically, because this thing is smart enough to go, I understand this 3D object in computing space, and I'm looking at this physical object in real space, and I'm able to match A to B. And then we can say, now you need to move this cable from there to there. But there's all sorts of, cool augmented reality and OT tech. That's OT to some degree.
What do you mean by OT?
Essentially operational technology.
Oh, okay, fine.
Information technology, yeah. So they talk about the IT-OT divide all the time, and OT is getting more and more IT related, right? So if you go into an average factory, you've got any number of devices that are not traditional computers, but a lot of them now are actually running Android or Linux or even Windows. And they perform functions as sensors or printers or counters or whatever you might have inside your factory, depending on what you're doing. And those things need to be serviced as well, right? And don't go wrong. And we've got customers who produce posters, essentially. So massive sheets of paper, right? And the machines that print those, you can imagine, are massive machines. They're massive pieces of paper around. And they're very complicated machines. And the company's based in France. And those machines, there's not many companies in the world that make machines like that. But everyone in the world has posters, right? So there might be somebody in Vietnam who's got a problem fix with one of those machines and can't fix it. And the expert's in France, right? So essentially, they can go with their tablet or phone and hold it up in front of the machine, or if they have a headset, great, hold it in front of the machine in Vietnam, and somebody in France can see that object and again can get a marker, and without, I think, even loading in the 3D renders for this kind of stuff, they can draw on a marker. It's their finger or mouse or whatever. They're drawing with a pointer. Say this here, that cable needs to come out and you need to replace it, or get this cable and put it in that port. You're drawing on your screen like it's a whiteboard, but it's a video feed. And then those pointers stay in place as the person moves around. So they still know where that was post fact. It's just, and it's not all that, but that's again, that's close to the original Teamviewer mission of what they talk about is getting an expert and bringing them to where the problem is. So traditionally that was getting an IT guy and bringing them to, or getting you and bringing them to your grandmother's machine or something. Random IT guy and bringing them to their customer's machine. But this is getting somebody who knows how to fix a giant printing machine and getting them to a printing machine, or getting somebody who knows how to fix an airplane engine and connecting them to the airplane engine or all airplane engines.
Yeah. And I'm actually thinking, so I worked on a thing with a company called Hilo a couple of years ago, and we had a thing called the manufacturer's feedback loop. Now Hilo, and I stand corrected, I don't know how far they've gone with this, but the idea behind it was, so Hilo's premise is, Hilo stands for high impact, low frequency events.
Yeah.
So think about symptoms to a problem.
Yeah.
And why this was interesting to me to join them was they were taking data from all the shipping companies in the form of incidents, processing them using a fault tree model, and then doing predictions around where you'd have critical injury or death occurring on a vessel. And the idea being is that if you have these low frequency, high impact events, you can avoid a critical illness, a critical injury or a death, which it's a fascinating thing, because if you think about the different types of vessels, a tanker versus a bulk carrier versus, I've forgotten some of these, a ferry, etc., they all have different characteristics. So for example, if a tanker hits something, because it's a multi-hull vessel, it'll take days to sink, and you've got time and whatever to sort out the problem and get off the boat. If a bulk carrier hits something, you minutes to get off because it's not multi-hull. So obviously there's slightly different things in your model, but the manufacturer's feedback loop was interesting because the idea behind that is if you can identify the part that's related to an incident, so seawater system failure, for example, is related to this part, you could proactively notify all the companies that have this vessel with this part to have it fixed.
Yes.
And then the idea with the augmented reality piece to this was exactly what you've been explaining, to say, if you've got this part, you need to replace it. Here's how you solve that problem. And you can train the crewmen's going to sit, they're going to be out at sea and they need to do something. You could send this information to their headset and then go and solve the problem.
Yep.
So I'm actually going to put you in contact with Manad after this, because I think it'd be worth seeing, you or whoever it may be, what could work here, because it's a big industry. It's a big thing for that industry, because besides the cost of the life in the sense of someone dying and the family and the rest of it, if someone dies at sea or is injured at sea, to get help to them is hard, incredibly hard. And that's why they want to try and avoid these things up front. And there's lots of focus on it. Really, that'd be a good thing to do. We talked a little bit about augmented reality. How are you seeing that apply to the sort of traditional digital employee experience field yet, or was it not there yet?
So our role in Teamviewer now is basically across all of the technologies, looking at, so not just the DEX stuff that they acquired with 1E, but everything, looking for areas of innovation. Essentially, I'm working with the field, working with customers, partners, our own teams that are working with customers and partners, and trying to identify where we should be going and what we should be doing. That goes across all of the areas, and where possible, where can we interlink and tie these things together to get more value, right? So far,
see my big model. Sorry, just go back to a joke earlier.
There you go. Nearly finished with my model. So far, I haven't seen a place to bring augmented reality into DEX, unfortunately.
I have an idea for you.
Go ahead then. I'd love to hear.
So we conceived that, so if you think about the traditional support structure, you have a level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, or whatever it is, some sort of levels thing. And obviously the idea behind automation and moving to something like non-persistent VDI or VDI is that you have a template that you can improve based on your experience in the environment. And that's about feedback loops. And that's where DEX really came in for us when I was at JP Morgan and UBS. And the idea was to replace level 1 or level 0 with automation. So if you can proactively detect, you can fix and all that stuff. And then by going down the route of non-persistent VDI, you can have a template that's always improving, and you can be constantly feeding this improved ecosystem. But you still need the human contact. You still need that white glove service for certain people, for certain situations, or whatever it is. And conceivably, if you give the user the ability to self-heal something, to fix it themselves, you're empowering your user and you're improving their thing. But there's still going to be situations where you're going to have to send somebody to a desk. You're going to have to address an issue in a hotel, or whatever it is. And then when I was at UBS and even JP Morgan, the reason why we went VDI was to avoid having someone having the laptop in a hotel, crossing a border, etc., because all the data sits inside the data center. But what we had thought about, and we had a mobile phone app that we could use to authenticate you, and then you'd log into your session, so it was passwordless and all that kind of stuff. But if you sent a service technician to the desk using augmented reality, you could scan the desk, and any deviation from a configuration. So think about something like daisy chaining, where I've got a network cable, I've plugged it into the phone, it's been plugged into the thin client, and then all of a sudden this user's experience is terrible. It's because they're going through the phone, and the phone potentially is not doing a proper connection. It's half duplex versus full duplex, whatever it is. A lot of guys wouldn't necessarily know to check for that. But if you scan the desk with the camera or on the phone, and it's looking for those patterns, it could give you the sort of red, amber, green thing to say, oh, hang on. This guy, and when I saw this in America, the guys were watching American football on their thin clients. And you got like a full HD thing, and they're like, but the thin client's not, the VDI's not coping. It's not meant to watch American football on. It's meant for
no type of football or TV, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Or video.
So let's give you a separate device that you could, like an iPad, and you can watch it on there. You could do something like that. In the same way, if you're doing an asset inventory, you're walking up to a desk.
So that's one that we have already rolled out. And it was actually raised that I used to travel a lot, like 140 days a year. And now with this role, I'm traveling a lot again. So in the past 2 weeks, I've been in Prague and Dusseldorf and Dublin and Toronto and Cleveland and Chicago and New Jersey and New York and Boston.
Wow.
And then flew back to Dublin and came back here to spend. But yeah, lots of customers are, and one of them actually was saying that inventory is an issue for them. Physical inventory. They're a bank. What have we got in each branch? What have we got wherever? And we were talking about getting a camera that is smart enough to recognize the 3D outfits around it, because they were inspired by the conversations of Mercedes engines and so on. And they're like, yeah, we can't. Okay, there's 5 PCs here, and so there's issues with that in terms of quality and various things. But you definitely could do something, and something is probably a big improvement on what makes you want better today.
Yeah, you look at docking stations, for example. How those things you can have different models and different variations. And often the problem is not actually the thin client, it's the docking station. Potentially that full duplex, half duplex issue, or they've plugged in some other stuff, like if someone's brought their Bluetooth keyboard or something like that, and they've plugged that in and that's not compatible, all those sorts of things. And it's deviation from a preferred standard, let's say, versus not. And just having, if you look at information security, doing the sort of the clean desk scenario, you walk in, you take the camera across the desks and you can see how many people have got printed out stuff that shouldn't be left lying around. There's lots of potentials. And then you've got people traveling in. You mentioned travel. We used it in real estate that if you're going to go sell or rent out an office complex, you could give them the augmented feel of, if I stand outside the office and I rotate around, where's the nearest tube station, bus stops, restaurants, whatever it is, related to that building. So when they're making the decision, they already have some of that stuff answered for them, which makes them comfortable that it's a good decision.
You'll have to argue that Google Maps kind of clicks that one though.
It does, but the point of doing it inside the banner of your company is that you're answering those questions. Even though you're using Google, you're paying Google for it. But you're saying, this is a great decision because you are only a 10-minute walk from the nearest tube station.
There's also sometimes companies, very large companies in particular, might have deals, not so much with restaurants typically, but often with hotels and whatever. So if you're in this area, stay in one of these 2 hotels because we've got a rate.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. It is where we've been talking for years about digital twins and so on. And it's becoming that more and more of the business is becoming digital twinnable and this blurring between physical and virtual, digital. There's all these new sort of AR glasses coming out or whatever, and they're getting thinner and cooler, and we'll be able to overlay stuff. Of course, who knows where we'll go. A few years down, it could be a contact lens or just a new eyeball, or get really cyberpunk with it. But it isn't. I think we're living at a very interesting time. I don't we've ever seen this rate of change at any other point in human history.
No, exactly. I was telling to some youngster the other day, and I was saying, you got to realize that when I was growing up, I had a home phone. Now I don't have a home phone. I didn't have a mobile phone until I was like 13, 14. You guys grew up with mobile phones literally from birth.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was the remote control to change the channel on the television. And that television was in black and white.
My favorite example is when my kids watch TV with me and I'll turn on BBC One or whatever it is, and it'll be like the news and then whatever show. And they're like, Daddy, I don't want to watch this. I want to watch Paw Patrol. I'm like, no, we're watching what's on TV in the order that somebody else has decided. They're like, no, we want to watch Netflix so we can change.
Well, this concept, I must admit, I'm with the kids on this one. I don't do live TV so much anymore. So my parents say to me things like, we're watching such and such on TV, and I'm like, I don't watch TV. I wonder I can watch whatever it was, but I probably won't be watching it when it's live.
It's quite funny because I don't know if you've noticed that all the streaming things are starting to bring adverts in. And you can pay not to have adverts.
Back to TV, yeah. They're becoming, but you see that meme from Star Wars where Obi-Wan shouts at Anakin, you were supposed to save the Force, not destroy it or whatever. And that was that meme, but with Netflix and Hulu and whatever, is like, and then versus the TV channel companies. The channel TV company was like, you were supposed to save television, not destroy it. So they're just moving back. They're costing us more and more, and adding ads just for good measure. Yeah,
that was the meme that I'd seen. Is that what's going to happen in the future? Is the subscriptions get more expensive and you get worse quality TV, and that's pretty much what I've seen.
Yeah.
I canceled Disney the other day, and Amazon Prime I keep because of delivery stuff, not because Amazon Prime's any good.
Yeah, I got it because of the delivery stuff, and I was really pleased I got extras.
Yes, exactly. Cool. So, I mean, we were talking about before we started recording, Andrew Hewitt joining you guys.
Yeah,
out of Forrester. What are your thoughts on some of those sorts of movements?
That's a massive coup, I think. Andrew's a fantastic thinker, and his role and my role actually overlap a little bit as well.
That's good.
He's a fantastic evangelist. Evangelism part of what I'm out with at the field and with the field. That's obviously part of what I'm doing as well. And he's also looking for new ideas and has loads of ideas, and we're making sure that we sync up regularly to make sure that those ideas get into engineering and to do something with them. They don't have to stay ideas. Obviously, it's a big issue with software companies is There's no shortage of ideas. It's a shortage of resources. So how do you prioritize and mobilize? Andrew is a great guy for helping lead that prioritization thinking, right?
Yeah.
If he thinks that more people are going to go for X than Y, we're probably still going to check with customers and whatnot, but he's probably going to be right.
He's had the opportunity to talk to all the vendors in the space.
And not just the vendors, all the customers.
All the customers.
How many people has he consulted with on this stuff over the past kind of 5 or 6 years? And the answer is a very big, very large number. So it's like myself. Most of my best ideas come from customers. It's plagiarism is the highest form of compliment. And I generally tend to attribute the idea to a customer, mostly because people don't listen to me if I say, I've had a great idea, we should do this.
Yeah.
Instead, I was speaking to company X and they said that this would be a great idea, and I think it's a really good idea. What do you think? And they go, oh, that's a great idea. It's just me, they don't listen. But maybe to listen to it just Andrew. But again, you can't beat customers. You can't beat, and the best ideas are never dreamt up in the office. And the things that drive the most value are always pushed by the customer. And Andrew is a great representative of a collection of those customers over years. Yeah, I think he's really looking forward to being able to directly impact what's going on as well and move the industry forward. He sees we were chatting a couple of weeks ago about this whole thing with digital employees and the changing meaning of that phrase. It isn't just people with a laptop anymore. It's also people with, a Michael Jackson glove and a funky hat on that are going around doing all of those things, very much digital employees. We've got people fixing coffee machines. It's a huge deal for Teamviewer. And essentially there's these really expensive, funky Italian coffee machines that are controlled by, essentially, I think it's an Android-based thing, which controls how much liquid goes in versus coffee granules and at what rate and various different what milk goes in. But you can actually change the quality of the output of a cup of coffee by remoting in with Teamviewer and Jason settings. It's like kids. And when they break, the barista can take their iPhone and hold it in front of it, and somebody back at base in Chimbali can look at that and say, no, you connected that tube that's supposed to be for the milk into the water pipe. You can pull that out, plug it in there, and literally draw again on their screen, and the person will see it on their phone. Yeah, connecting experts to the problem. And with what they did with 1E is also connecting experts to the problem. But the difference is the expert is not there live in real time. The expert has fixed the problem previously, and it's saved as an automation. And now when the problem occurs, it drives itself automatically. You're still connecting an expert with a problem, right? And always it's about getting a solution. Why do you put an expert on a problem? To fix it. So not to admire it, but to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's this thing about synchronous fixing and asynchronous fixing, as well as obviously repeated issues being remediated automatically.
Yeah.
And this, we've got, check, there's two things. So like we had a dry issue, we had to wait for the guy, we had to wait a week for him to come, all that kind of stuff. And you think if it was just a smart device and all you had to do was change something, could tell us, and we could.
Could they not have remoted in and done it maybe, or?
But then I was laughing, there was a meme the other day, I think it was a Samsung fridge that obviously has an Android locator. It's asking you to pick the bicycles on the, what's it called?
The captcha.
And there's no way to click the button to carry on because it's in the wrong part of the screen. And I think that's like the perfect example of having Teamviewer connected in, because that's the only way you're going to fix that.
Yeah, I think they need to redesign there. If they're UI there somehow, well, maybe not. When I go to open the fridge, ask me which things, if traffic lights are bicycles or whatever.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the industry now? There's a lot of AI talk, obviously. You can't say anything without saying AI.
Yeah, you can't speak without saying AI. We've been doing a lot with AI. We were doing a lot with AI in 1E. And Teamviewer were doing a lot with AI and Teamviewer, and now that the two have come together, there's some crazy stuff. One of my favorite things to talk about, and it is one of these synergies that, I actually hate that word, but it's true, where it was just so obvious when we looked at it. So there's a cool thing that you might not have seen when you were using Teamviewer recently, but I think it's an added extra in fairness, but there's a thing called session insights. So you have a session, right? You remote control the machine, that's a session. What's an insight? Well, session insights looks at what's happening during that session. Ryan remoted into Jason's machine, and he regedit as administrator, and he went to this registry key and he changed it from a 0 to a 1, and then he opened up command prompt and he stopped the service with command prompt, and then he deleted a file, and then he started the service again, and that was the session, right? Whereas John connected into Mary's machine and he went into services in control panel and stopped the service, and then he went into Explorer and he deleted the file, and then he went into registry and he changed the key and then started the service again. There's two different mechanisms of doing the same process. to fix the same problem. And this thing is smart enough to understand that this issue has happened twice now, has been fixed manually, basically in the same way, but different methods twice. And actually, in the organization this week, it's happened 57 times. And this is how you fix it, right? You fix it by changing this key, stopping this thing, starting this thing, deleting that file, whatever, in this order. And it automatically is smart enough to look at what's going on the screen, write these things up, update a ticket to say, this is what Ryan did when he connected into the JSON machine. Because Ryan just normally will say, I fixed it or something. The tickets are not actually getting filled in with the right specifically by service desk people, and problem solved. How, why, we need to know. And so it fills all that in. So you don't have to go and type anything in at all, not even problem solved. And it's nicely documented. It's grouping them so that we know that it's happened X number of times. And now we can take that and use that as drivers for automations, because we know what things are driving call that we're fixing manually or driving call tickets up. So we can now take that and we can actually look into AI that we've got in beta at the moment, which will actually write an automation for you using Scale, the Teamviewer Dex language now was the one-year language. And so you don't need to learn how to write that anymore. There's an LLM that'll do that for you happily. And it'll take this input, create that thing, and now we have a virtuous cycle. So now never more should people have to go in and do that particular sequence of events, but next week there'll be some other sequence of events that's number one. But can we get through 3 or 5 or 10 of those a week? Can we eliminate them so that those particular errors don't? We had a customer actually in South Africa, and there was a guy down there, really smart guy, and he did this manually, basically. Their call drivers through their ticket desk, and he wrote automations for them. And over the course of a year, he personally created 150 automations. And that drove down ticket volumes by some crazy amount. They had a 47% reduction in ticket volume between when he started and finished. And it isn't that there won't be 151st automation needed the next week, but there is a Pareto curve, right? There is as you were talking about high frequency, low frequency, high impact or whatever, there's high frequency, low impact as well, typically. So in the help desk, you have small number of things that happen a lot. They may or may not have a high impact, but they happen frequently, and they
passive resets
fix them. Yeah, and then there's a dropping curve, right? The Pareto curve. It drops down sharply and flattens out, and you got to chase the tail. But so he was chasing that tail manually. We're now looking at a future, basically a present, where we identify the tail and can chase it and fix it automatically, and an AI is all sorts of that. This AI, though, I was talking to a bank about this in the US 2 weeks ago, whenever I was in whichever one of those cities I mentioned. And they were saying, oh, yeah, but the issue is we wouldn't be able to use that because there's potentially PCI or PII data going to be on both screens, and we can't have that screen sent down. So let's say there's a problem in Excel, and so what that means, in that Excel spreadsheet, there's a lot of account numbers or social security numbers or whatever data. This thing is actually smart enough that it blurs those out. It doesn't actually take, because for the client, obviously, was sending the data up. The client is smart enough to pattern recognize from an image what's happening on the screen, that this data is PII data. So what the computer is looking at in the back end, what the AI is looking at, is basically that, but with blur all over.
Yeah.
You can request the video or the images and see, because it's search for image, shot videos. And so it's really cool. It's actually smart enough to identify private information unobfuscated, so that information is not leaving the business's control or whatever. It's just, we're looking at the fact it's Excel, and we clicked on file and print or whatever. We don't care about what the data of the Excel spreadsheet is, or what the information on the Word page is, or anything else. And that could be obviously something in the background, rather, because they're actually working in command prompt, but the Excel file is open in the background, all obfuscated. And that's all AI, obviously, as well. And it is just crazy how advanced this stuff has gotten, how quickly. Like I said, it's great to be living in the future, right? It is all moving so fast. I'm delighted that I'm continually amazed by technology, and I've got to work in it for the past maybe 30 years now. But, I used to always say that, and it's still true, that our customers use our tools to do things that I didn't even necessarily think of as possible, right? And that surprised me. And one of the things I look for when I'm out there talking to customers is where I see a repeated pattern of that kind of use. And I was, you know what, we should stop having people having to do that themselves, and we should make that a natural feature in the product and bring it in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that example. I mean, when I moved to the UK, we built an engine called RTD, real-time decisioning. which was on that premise. And I used the OODA loop as the design: observe, orientate, decide, and act, with your experience being what you learn through. And on that intelligent edge, which would be the device, you'd have a list of fixes for a problem. And then if it ran that fix and fixed it, it would tell the rest of the machines in that thing that I fixed it with this problem. So running on disk space or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then that would feed to the servers to say, okay, I've run this fix for this problem, just so so increment by one. Very basic stuff. In those days, machine learning wasn't called machine learning and whatever. And I used complex event processing as the concept. But for having to explain where it is now was the dream, in the sense that if someone's using an Excel spreadsheet and we can see they haven't saved it, if you work for 10 minutes, you don't give it a real name, etc. We forced them to give it a name so they don't lose the data. But we couldn't do a lot of that stuff because we just didn't have the tools. And now that stuff it's there. It's easy. Provided you're allowed to allow to send the data externally and bring it back in.
Yeah. I did the training for the AI that writes CL myself, and I had to learn quite a lot about how AI and LLMs and so on work and how to train them, the different types of training, whether you got RAG or whether you're doing sort of model manipulation or whatever. And it's really interesting. But it's actually crazy how much of it is being abstracted to a point where natural language is the language for communicating with the device or with the machine.
Yeah.
And the bar is being lowered in terms of the complexity of doing things. And I think ultimately that's only going to be a good thing.
I just look at, I'm rebuilding my product and I'm using Cursor and other tools. I haven't written any code yet. Everything's been done by the machine. And the volume of work that I've done in a couple of weeks, if I did it myself, and besides the learning curve of having to learn some of this new stuff because I haven't used it before, they talk about a 20x factor of the thing. I'd probably say it's more than that at this stage. And if I think about some of the challenges we had, I've been lucky in the sense that I've worked for vendors and I've been the customer. Some of the biggest challenges we've had is the ability to have someone to go write the script. We can all identify the problem. We can all figure out how to solve the problem. But to have someone who could spend a week writing a efficient PowerShell script that goes and solves this problem. Now you go,
it was a rare skill, and now it's a commodity.
Hey, ChatGPT, fix this problem for me.
But you do still need a human typically to define what the problem is. Although that I was describing how we're beginning to do that with AI, but also I've done some stuff myself with AI, and it was like, write something that does this, and it writes something, and it may or may not do that, but it certainly doesn't do it well, and you know how to do it better. So if you break it down into smaller and smaller parts, and get it to do the small parts and then join them up yourself, you tend to get a much higher quality result rather than asking it to do a big piece. You ask it to do the little pieces sequentially, and you can actually get a very powerful and very high quality result.
Yeah. And I think that's where I remember when this was all kicking off, this idea of a prompt engineer. I was never going to be a prompt engineer per se, but I always thought it'd be a skill set you had to have.
Google Foo is a skill set that you had to have for the past 20 years, right?
Yeah.
As strong as your Google Foo. And people who can use Google and know how to use it in certain ways will get things done more quickly and easily and find things that others weren't able to find or do. It's the same thing now with prompt engineering. It's basically just Google Foo in a more generic term. OpenAI wouldn't like calling it Google Foo, for example.
Yeah, I get that. And I think that just the little things like, I was talking to someone yesterday about this, having the AI ask you questions so it can understand what you're trying to achieve, instead of you trying to tell it what you want to achieve. It's such a powerful thing just by flipping the script.
You can tell it to do that and it will. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. Great. I don't know if you got more time. I know we ran over because we had some technical stuff.
I do, but I think we'll probably have half an hour there and we can have it. I actually want to talk to you about something else as well. Just occurred to me one.
Okay. Let's end this off. What's the best way for you to get in contact with you?
People can ping me on LinkedIn, just for the easiest way. You can obviously first name dot last name at teamviewer.com as well. But it's, I'm on LinkedIn. You can ping me there very easily.
Great. And obviously the website for Teamviewer is worth looking up with some videos.
Yeah, there is actually some really cool videos up there that I've been really pleasantly surprised by. Some surprising tech. But yeah, it's lots of people have asked me, and you were asking me earlier, what is it like? How is the acquisition going and blah, blah, blah. I think it's incredibly positive for everybody involved. And it's a fun few months. Hopefully it turns into a fun few years. And we'll see how much we can change this DEX thing, not just the definition of DEX being all digital employees, but also that level of AI and automation that just surfaces problems and fixes them magically.
Do you think you're going to move, as much as you've got the corporate sort of world, do you think you're going to move into the personal life of those people. So if I sign up, if I work at a company that's got Teamviewer as a corporate license, and I'm using Teamviewer as a free thing because I use it for personal reasons. But do you think some of that stuff's going to proliferate into the personal life? Because
yeah, look, 1E as a business, our average customer was 40 endpoints, right? TeamViewer's definition of enterprise wasn't even based on endpoints, and it was often companies with 500 or 1,000 machines were considered, and we wouldn't have sold to those in 1E. We're already coming down, and we've added what was 1E technology as a new product called Dex Essentials, which is part of the TeamViewer suite, and you can basically, it embeds itself into where you get Tensor or Remote or any of the other TeamViewer tech, and it does automation. It looks at stuff that's commonly goes wrong with machines and fixes it automatically. And it is Dex focused and so on. And we built in the Dex metrics and so on already into the TeamViewer Tensor data set, and you can get access to it through that UI and blah, 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 blah. It is logical because TeamViewer does have a very large, not SMB, but individual consumer customer base. It is logical that that continue to flow downwards, right? At the upper end, you'll have global banks and other people that are using it and thinking of new ways to use it and surprising us with the tech that they build using our platform and so on, right? Then you'll have the more SMB where they're getting the cream of that crop, the most valuable, most useful stuff curated for them essentially and made very simple and very easy without needing to know all the complex stuff, without having to have that scarce, the one scarce resource is one who knows how to make it happen. They don't even need to necessarily think about what they should be doing because other people are, and it's getting curated for them. And I don't see any reason why that wouldn't continue to trickle down, other than we may look to get paid for providing people with that. But we can, the same sorts of things that go wrong with corporate machines ought to go wrong with personal machines. There's no reason why we can't have automations fixing them there as well.
Yeah. So where this came, I mean, there's two sides. One is obviously the ecosystem lock-in, that if you give people, if you're in the, it's what Microsoft did very well. If you were a Microsoft employee, you can have as much Microsoft stuff as you wanted. So when you left Microsoft, you still preferred your Microsoft stuff.
And they gave it to students while they're in college so that they could read it as they left and went into business.
Yeah, 100%. So there's that aspect to it. But also I look at BYOD, where a person wants to log into their VDI or their remote desktop, but they don't have that. We actually built a utility for this for our users to go and fix things on their personal device so that they could securely log in with the right HDX drivers, the right VPN client, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece of it, which is going into the gray area of how far do you go?
We've done that with a bank in the US where they've 26 boxes that must be ticked in order for a device to connect to the VPN. And that could be a personal device, whatever. If you want into the bank's VPN, you have to have these 26 boxes ticked. You have to be up to date with antivirus. You have to have these services running. You have to be whatever. And they use 1E to make sure, because previously Cisco AnyConnect was the VPN. And when the user went to use it, it would go, nah, you're failing on some of these things. You don't get in. But the user went to use it because they need to go in and do some work. So now is not to tell them no. So it's 1E in the mix. It's continually monitoring for the status. And if anything goes out of whack, it puts it back in whack instantaneously. So they might have had 3 problems in the past day, but they've all been fixed. And now when they go to log in, they just get to log in. Whereas previously they get told you have 3 problems. So they go to log in. That's less good. So yeah, and that can be on private devices as well. Obviously you can run our tech on those things.
That's the thing, is the giving the tool to the user as a value add as opposed to a commercial ad.
No, and thankfully I don't have to make those decisions. So
yes.
I'm not the pricing or marketing guy. I'm the exactly. We probably possibly would do with this thing there. But thanks a million for having me on. It's been a great chat, as it always is. And and if anyone is interested in reaching out to Teamviewer or me, they can do
super cool. Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you for listening to our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share it with your friends and colleagues. Help us grow our reach. Please also check out our website, www.value.work, and our product that's on there. It's something we worked really hard on. We hope that it benefits you.